At 8 miles wide and 43 meters deep, the Sea of Galilee is not a place you want to be found in a storm. But that's exactly where the disciples of Jesus found themselves. As fishermen, they were used to storms coming upon the lake. In fact, the locals had a legend about the lake and the fate of anyone caught in an impossible squall. The legend stated that if you were about to perish, a spirit would come to you, walking on the water. The spirit of death would come to you to take away your soul. I mean, no wonder the disciples were so alarmed to see Jesus walking out to them in the midst of the storm. They must have been fearing for their lives. It looked as though death had come to steal them away, whereas in reality, life had come to give them a valuable lesson. How often do we look at the circumstances in our lives and see nothing but despair, hopelessness, or death? But maybe sometimes these dire circumstances, these events, they're not random. Maybe sometimes these terrifying times are not from the enemy. Maybe, just maybe, the Lord is trying to teach us a lesson. So the Apostle Peter, putting on a brave front, calls out to the Lord and says, "Lord, if that really is you, call me to come out to you on the water." Now you've got to love Peter, haven't you? He's not the sharpest or the brightest, but boy, is he bold. I mean, if that were me, I would have said something like, "Lord, if that really is you, what's my favourite colour?" Or, "Lord, if that is you, what did we have for dinner last night?" But Peter is so bold. He wants to do what he sees his rabbi doing. He wants to walk upon the storm. Jesus calls out, "Come," and Peter takes his first hesitant steps upon the stormy waves. It must have felt like he was dreaming. His first foot planted firmly on the water, and then his second. Peter's mind must have been doing somersaults. I mean, what was happening? Were the laws of physics being suspended right underneath his feet? Was the water turned into ice? What was going on? No fisherman, in fact no human, had ever seen or done such a thing. And so long as Peter stayed focused upon the face of his rabbi, he defied the storm raging about him. But Peter, not unlike the rest of us, lost his nerve. His mind gave way to disbelief, and reality suddenly kicked in, and unfortunately so did the laws of nature. In one fell swoop of doubt, this human hovercraft plunged feet first into the depths of the sea. What an opportunity lost. For a moment there was a divine connectedness between God and his highest creation. The relationship upon those waves defied all that was possible, and a spark of transcendent reality flashed between Peter and Jesus. Heaven's host must have watched with bated breath. Then all was lost. How much do we miss out when we fail to recognize a divine moment? You see, Peter was never in danger. He was in the will of God. And no sooner did he sink than Jesus was there to pull him up again and place him back into the boat. And I thank God that he has a boat for all of us. Now, some years ago, my wife Sarah was expecting our third child. Our two previous children had been twins, so fortunately we'd gotten two for the price of one. But on this occasion, my wife had taken a visit to the midwife to check on the progress of our third baby. And she took our two 3-year-old boys along with her to the surgery. As Sarah was being checked by the midwife, my two boys were busy playing with the available toys in the surgery. But unknown to them or my wife, a used, open, yellow sharps bin was sitting there on the floor alongside the toys. And naturally my boys wanted to see what was in the bin, so they plunged their tiny little hands into the bin and were repeatedly pierced by used, dirty needles. By the time my wife realised what was going on, it was too late. My boys' hands were cut and bleeding. Every parent's worst nightmare was coming true for us. A monumental storm was circling above our heads. We immediately met with the chief doctor to find out how this could have happened and what danger this posed to my boys. However, the answers he gave to us were very disappointing. He confessed that there were several patients in the village where we lived that were HIV positive, but had no idea whether these needles had been used on these patients or not. He had mislaid the records. I mean, how would you have responded to news like that? As parents, our hearts and minds were numb with fear. We had no way of knowing whether our little ones would be okay or not. How could this happen to us? I mean, we're Christians. We're church pastors. After all, isn't church leadership immune from the storms of life? From attacks of the enemy? Well, for the next 6 months, I took my 2 3-year-old boys to the city hospital where I watched them undergo painful blood tests. I had to listen to them yelp and cry as over and over again I watched the nurse try and locate a vein in their little hands. During this time, it would have been easy to lose my focus, to take my eyes off of God, off of Jesus. But I was reminded of Peter throughout. I was reminded that the storms are going to come, whoever you are, and whatever position you're in. And you can choose to sink or stand. For those 6 months, Sarah and I chose to stand. For 6 months, we prayed and asked God that if it were possible and if it were needed, Lord, exchange my blood for theirs. I was willing to give my life, my blood, so that my children could be saved. In that traumatic experience, my heart became strangely entwined with God's heart for us. In the storm, I glimpsed a little of what God feels for us. Now, storms come and storms go, and life is like a boat floating upon uncertain waters. We can choose to sink or stand, to focus upon the waves or the face of our Saviour. And I want to encourage you, whoever you are, to choose the face of Jesus.